Does Wall Street want to be your landlord? Are we going to be a nation of renters? The answer to both of those is yes. Definitely yes on the first part, and potentially yes on the second. So what's happening? First of all, this isn't anything that's too new. What's new is how aggressive it's becoming. So after the foreclosure crisis, we saw BlackRock buy a ton of homes. They were buying at one point $100 million a month of foreclosed properties. Now, for the market, that was actually a very good thing because it helped the foreclosure crisis end sooner. It took houses that were depreciating areas off the market so that housing market could start to rebound. They turned it into rental homes, proved that it was a profitable and sustainable class of assets. Okay, on the large scale. And over the years, they've continued to buy at a lower level. However, now, all the institutional investors have seen the potential and they all want in on the party. Yes, I mean, that's the thing. As we head into, inflationary times, we're already there, right? How much is milk today? Housing is one of the greatest inflation hedges. Also, if you have someone who's going to pay you rent for an investment, I was reading something where basically they can borrow money at 1.4%, and based off of that, the rent would pay it back within 8 years. The investment would be wholly paid off. Why wouldn't they do that? That's great money. After that first 8 years, it's just all gravy. And the funniest part about all of it, it's not like they're actually really paying debt back. So the way that it works is they have a pot of money. They invest the pot of money. They then sell it as real estate investment trusts. And then they keep a management fee or some level of carry, and they do it all over again. Right? And they're not taking, the gains from the whole pot. They're taking a percentage of every single pot so that they can free up the capital and do it again and again and again and again. Do you guys feel like you're in Karate Kid? Wax on, wax off, and again. Okay? So there's really no end in sight to that capital drying up. There's not. So what else is happening? What's exasperating this situation? Build to rent. Yes. So foreclosures have basically disappeared. So they're like, what can we do now? I know. Let's buy the entire community. I bet the builder would give us a little bit of discount if we bought the whole community in one swoop and wrote a check. Why wouldn't the builder do that? That's great. Why would they deal with the hassle of employing salespeople, dealing with buyers, specifying the houses to what the buyers want, dealing with like, oh, you hung that wrong, when they can just have a big institutional investor write them a fat check and walk away. So you may be in a community where you're seeing a lot of building, but nothing's for sale. Build to rent. And there's other people getting involved. There's now institutional investors, directly pairing with the builders. So from day one, this is always the intent. There was no chance that they were ever going to build for you. From day one, it was always built for the institutional investors. Day one. And on top of that, you've got some of our nation's biggest builders that are setting up their own subdivisions to do this and structuring to do the pot of money. Yeah, except on their pot of money, they're also determining the profit margins that they're giving themselves. So that's it. I mean, there's a lot going on. It's very interesting. But from a buyer standpoint, what to do? Okay. Number one, if you're waiting for foreclosures, you are not going to see them. And if you do see them, the institutional investors are going to buy them before you have a chance to breathe. So if you're staying out of the market because you think it's going to go down, you're wrong. You're not competing with your neighbor. You're not competing with the guy in the other state that buys investment properties. You're competing with big money that has huge pools of capital and has to distribute it in order to keep their investors happy. Yeah. So do they care if they pay 5, 10, 15, 20% over what the house is worth? I mean, they'd prefer not to, but it doesn't really affect them because they're not in it for the short game. They're not worried about the monthly payment. They're in it for the long game. They're in it for the pot of gold to be recycled and to make percentages off of it. So No, I mean, I would be very aggressively looking right now before institutional investors are spreading out into more and more areas, because that's what's going to happen. Right now, it's hyper-focused in a couple markets across the country. When I was reading, Dallas, Florida came up for sure, Idaho. But it's like diamonds, right? If you have someone who's buying all the diamonds in the world, once they buy everything, like let's say they want all the diamonds in one country, do you think they're going to stop? No. If they prove that diamonds are valuable in XYZ country and they buy them all, well then they're going to go to the next country and buy them all, and the next country and the next country. And that's how this is going to spread, state by state by state by state by state. Okay. So how do you stop them? That's where I really struggled, because I was like, well, you know, if we band together as a society and as home sellers, we do not sell to institutions, then we can stop them. They'll just have to do the build to rent new communities and they can't have anything else. Sounds really good in principle. However, I'm pretty sure that if someone's sitting there and they have a cash offer that's 20% higher than the offer from the sweet couple down the street, there's very few people who are actually going to understand what this means. Okay, so I don't think that's a great solution. Legislation, we'll get our legislators involved to stop them. I'm sorry, I just laugh at that because, okay, here's how it would go. We don't want you buying all these houses. Well, if you let us buy all these houses, we'll make some of them affordable housing. Oh, okay. So for every 2,000 we buy, you, dear city, can have 20 that are affordable housing. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it so that after year 6, it's not necessarily affordable housing, but you'll have it for 6 years, but you're not gonna read the fine print. Okay, you're wonderful. Buy what you want. Okay, and look, I totally made all that up, so I don't want to get sued, but like seriously, we've seen this in the United States with affordable housing. It's an issue. Like, I live in California where you can basically walk down the street and you're like, hey Bob, John, Sally, you know, tent cities are not uncommon. And I know there's some people that are like, you're in a liberal state, that's why. It's in Austin too. It's everywhere. It's in New York. New York's liberal as well. But regardless, housing and housing insecurity is an issue in our country. Okay? This is not going to solve that. No. So what is my biggest concern? Retirement. Retirement. So on the short scale, you're looking at this going, oh my God, I'll never be able to get a house. It's going to be insane to come up against them. I don't believe that right now because it's growing in numbers. I was reading about another company that's going to be deploying $5 billion over the next 3 years into residential real estate in the United States. It's going to grow, right? It's going to snowball. It's going to become an issue. But I think you've got a window to still get in the door before they start spreading out everywhere. Now, if you're in one of those communities where they're buying everything, sorry, you might have to move out of town. Horrible. But my biggest concern is, okay, let's say that this happens. Let's say we become a renter nation. Let's go to the darkest place of all of this. And if you're watching this going, renting's not bad. I agree. Renting's not bad until you're on a fixed income and the cost of living is continuing to increase. That is when renting is bad. Renting is bad when you can't afford to pay the rent because you've retired. So that's the concern here. Like, and also, American retirement planning for generations has been buy a house, pay it off. That way, when you're retired, you have a set cost of living. You don't have to worry about, you know, an increase in the monthly cost of your house. The biggest increase would be insurance and taxes, but the bulk of the payment you've paid off during your working years, so you have a chance of retirement. If we become a renter nation, when do we retire? Okay? Just gonna throw that out there. When do we retire? If we as a country decide, yeah, we're totally cool to rent, like owning a house is a pain in the butt. It is. Then what happens when we're 80? What happens when we're 90? People are having longer life expectancies. How is that going to work? So are we going to do rent control across the, I mean, is that the legislation that ultimately will come out of this? Is that at some point, or are we just, as people hit a certain age and can't afford the rent increases, are we just going to throw them on the street? I mean, look, this is at 15, 20, 30 years from now, right, that I'm thinking, but what's the plan here? Because that's actually the big concern, because if people are like, oh, well, if the people can't afford the rent, then the companies will, have to figure something out. No, the companies will just fill the places with new bodies. Like, it's a company. I mean, there's capitalism. Like, I'm all for capitalism. I'm a huge fan of it. Don't even take this video as me trying to give away free housing or anything else. It is not that. But I do concern of a future where the cost of living is constantly increasing and there's no way to control it. I just don't know how you retire at that point. That's my biggest concern. And personally, the concept of working till I'm 90 does not sound fun. Now, based on this, I may be retired in 10 years. I'm okay with that. But what about everyone else? Yeah. So weigh in. What do you guys think? Is the institutional investor a real threat? Am I being overly dramatic, which has been accused? What's going to happen? What do you guys think? What can we do to make it so that people still have a shot of home ownership in America? We are at the tipping point on this. We're at the point where more and more companies are realizing how much money is in this and are deploying capital, and they've done the pot method enough times that they know that it's pretty darn bulletproof. So what do we do as non-institutional investors? Weigh in.